Io Saturnalia omnes, and welcome to the world that was. This week I'm going to be making some honey spiced wine that was popular in the Eastern Mediterranean, according to some contemporary Roman records. The name of this drink comes from Apicius, and roughly translates to surprise or marvelous spiced wine. This recipe was even recorded in the Jerusalem Talmud, which reaffirms the claims for this drink's popularity in the Eastern Mediterranean and Levant. And, given the time of year that I'm posting this, it would be a fitting drink to serve for any festivities you might have planned for Saturnalia. But before I begin, I just want to make it very clear this recipe is for an alcoholic beverage. So please don't make this if you're under the legal drinking age wherever you are. It's 18 here in Ireland, but it might be totally different to where you are. In any case, let's now take a look at the world that was. To begin with, we need to grind our spices. You can of course use pre-ground spices, but they tend to have a milder taste than freshly ground ones. In any case, grind your peppercorns into a fine powder and put it into a bowl. Pepper is one of the most prominent spices mentioned here, so get to grinding. Then we need to go grind up some fennel seeds. The original recipe explicitly calls for mastic gum to be used, which is the resin from the mastic tree, but this can be pretty hard to obtain, so fennel works as a cheaper and more easily found substitute. This will give off a very herbal aniseed tone to the drink. And finally, we need some saffron. We don't technically need to grind this up, but you can if you want. Saffron is one of the most expensive spices in the world, with a history of cultivation dating back to the 7th century BC. If you don't want to splash out and buy some saffron, ground turmeric would work in a pinch, though in antiquity it seems that this may have been used as a dye rather than a spice, based on the Assyrian sources anyway. When you're done with your spices, it's time to turn to your wine. Pour 1/3 of a cup of your wine and all of your honey into a pot. Put all of this over a medium-high heat and stir it continually until the mixture starts to boil, which should take about 7 to 8 minutes. When it hits a boil, bring the pot off the heat and let the mix cool down, so it stops bubbling. Whenever it cools down, put it back onto the heat and bring it to a boil again. Do this a total of 3 times, and on the 3rd time you can leave your wine off the heat for a bit. If it cools down completely to the point where it acts more like a honey than a wine, you can just reheat this over medium heat for about 1 or 2 minutes. But don't bring it to a boil again. When your honey and wine mix is done, go pour the remainder of your bottle of wine into a bowl or pot. On top of this, toss your ground pepper, your fennel seeds or mastic, and your bay leaves, and your saffron. You can let this sit overnight and stew if you want, to let the flavors mingle some more, but you can also just drink this once it reaches room temperature too, which is what I'm doing. Whatever you do, pour your wine through a fine mesh sieve to catch any large pieces of your spice or leaves. You might want to water down the drink slightly, as it results in a much smoother drink than if you drink it straight from the pot, but either way is good. The finished wine is cloudy but very sweet. Depending on how you filter this, it might take on a more peppery taste than mine, which is also again based on the amount of peppercorns you use. It might also be clearer than mine. I'd recommend straining your mix through a cheesecloth or a very fine sieve. As it turned out, mine allowed a large amount of peppercorns through, which tended to stick to the back of your throat. This recipe for spiced wine is somewhat similar to another simpler kind of wine recorded by Apicius, traveller's wine, which also required a portion of the wine to be boiled, which would remove quite a bit of the alcohol within this drink, but this does not make it a non-alcoholic drink. I excluded dates from this recipe because the wine I was using was already quite sweet, but you can add them in if you want. Just mash them into a paste and put them in with the honey mixture whenever it's finished boiling for the 3rd time. Like I've said in other videos, the type of wine here really depends on the kind of group this was prepared for. So richer Romans would have been able to afford a fine red wine for this, which is what I wound up using here, but a rosé or a white wine would be a very good substitute for what the wider Roman populations would have been able to access, if they were even able to make a drink like this at all. Pepper was very popular in the Eastern Mediterranean around the time of the Roman Empire, particularly around the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, so it's no wonder why this drink would have been recorded in the Jerusalem Talmud. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed this look at the world that was. If you liked what you saw, please leave a like on this video, and possibly even subscribe to my channel for some more ancient recipes. I'll be taking a couple of weeks off making these videos to enjoy the holidays and to finish off my master's thesis, but I will be back on the 8th of January. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the new year.